Welcome to Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. Brought to you by the Vigilant Fox and Zeee Media. I'm your host, Maria Zeee. Tonight, Thomas Massie is making waves on the big beautiful bill. Canada capitulates again, and no end in sight to world war as Russia-Ukraine tensions increase. Let's get into the Daily Pulse. Thomas Massie reveals what would get him to vote yes on Trump's big, beautiful bill. This in from the Daily Caller. Republican Kentucky Rep. Thomas Massie revealed in an exclusive interview with the Daily Caller that he could vote yes on President Trump's big, beautiful bill if a, quote, skinny version of the legislation materializes. Massie said he will not support the bill in its current form because it does not cut government spending substantially enough. Massie's opposition to the bill is one reason Trump and his political allies have threatened to primary him in the 2026 midterms. Pro-Israel lobbying group American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, is also trying to primary Massie, according to a source who spoke with the caller. Now, it's not only an anonymous source that has disclosed this to the Daily Caller. Lobbying groups have been quite open about their desire to primary Massie because apparently you're not allowed to focus on America's prosperity before anyone else's. But I digress. There is a version of the bill, though, that Massie said he could support in a group text with about 10 other congressmen called Budget Hawks. Massie said they have floated the idea of splitting the bill in two. The article continues, quote, "I can tell you the conservatives in the House are getting antsy with every change that happens in the Senate, and there's a concern that maybe they need to just skinny this thing down and try to do just a few things," he asserted, added that they may try to do two bills instead of one. The first one should be just the absolute essentials to the president's priorities, which would be secure the border and extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, he explained. Massie said that he could theoretically support that bill depending on its impact on the deficit. Imagine that, focusing on what Trump initially wanted and not all these other things that have just been sandwiched into this colossal thing. So it goes on, it would be a lot of speculation to say that's where we're going to end up. But if we did end up there and there was a repeal of the Green New Deal subsidies, I could be for that, possibly. I'd have to see the total budget impact in the House, he told the caller. There have been several changes to the Senate version of the bill that have raised red flags for Massie. They stripped the REINS Act provision, something Massie personally lobbied for in the House version, which requires congressional approval for major federal regulations before they take effect. The Senate is also mulling over a longer phase-out of renewable energy tax credits and whether to reduce the income cap for state and local tax or SALT deductions. Massie said that lowering the threshold would benefit blue states more than red states. Massie speculated that the president's July 4 deadline is unlikely to be met by Congress and that House Speaker Mike Johnson's promise to force Congress to meet over the holiday is likely an empty threat meant to appease Trump. The real deadline, Massie alleged, is sometime in August. Quote, "I think they'll use the threat of cancelling the August recess. They'll take a week off the August recess and say we're in session, and then they'll give it back to us if this bill passes," he said. This next section we think is very important for people to pay attention to. It says another sticking point for Massie is that he is using a shorter window to score the bill's impact on the deficit. While the Congressional Budget Office typically scores bills on a 10-year timeline, Massie is only looking at the next 3 or 4 years. Trump's plans for no tax on tips and overtime and tax reform for seniors, for example, are set to expire after 3 years in the bill. So Massie says the deficit impact is great over the next 3 years in the big bill that passed the House, and it's only 5 years out when it starts to go in the other direction because they plan on having these tax cuts expire and they plan on having the military spending expire, he told the caller. But what will happen 4 years from now is they'll say, oh my gosh, that Congress 4 years ago and that president set up this fiscal cliff and the impact to our military is going to be too great if they let the spending expire. So we've got to use the current policy as the baseline, he said. Massie alleged that the House is effectively doing nothing while they wait for the Senate to deliver its version of the big, beautiful bill. The House is just sort of over here treading water, he asserted. We're just not doing much in the House. Where the Speaker has the House looking like it's busy, it's not really that busy, he said. So there's this false narrative being presented that Thomas Massie is just a stonewaller, and if you support President Trump, you must be against Thomas Massie. It's the most bizarre psychology and psyop really being imposed on the people right now. You can support both President Trump and Thomas Massie at the same time. Sure, we love the president, but we don't have to love all of his advisors and the people who have put horrendous things into this bill or the bill at all. Thomas Massie is focusing on the fiscal aspects. We've reported to you the AI aspect, where essentially states are barred from any form of AI regulation for the next 10 years, and Silicon Valley companies get to do whatever they want, including geoengineering using AI, with complete impunity. It is ludicrous, dystopian, and complete government overreach by the federal government over the states, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has voiced her complete opposition to this as well. But an ad was created recently as a bit of a hit on Massie. Take a look at this.
What happened to Thomas Massie? President Trump is banning sex changes on minors. Massie voted against it. President Trump is cutting taxes and saving Kentucky families $10,000. Massie voted against it. President Trump is securing our border and deporting criminal aliens. Massie voted against Trump again. And after Trump obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program, Massie sided with Democrats and the Ayatollah. Let's fire Thomas Massie. MAGA Kentucky is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So by saying that the federal government needs to get the approval of Congress to go to war, that's apparently siding with the Ayatollah. Well, actually, it's siding with the Constitution, which is something that Thomas Massie regularly does because he is a very strong supporter of the Constitution. And this notion that apparently he is allowing sex changes for minors, or he wants sex changes for minors. Well, Thomas Massie has addressed this. He said the big beautiful bill now allows funding sex changes for minors. This ad slams me for voting against the BBB, but the Senate just stripped the ban on sex changes for minors from the BBB. By the ad's twisted logic, those who support the Senate's edits now support sex changes for minors. And there's so much that we are being presented by the mainstream media and paid influencers about this bill, but as Thomas Massie identifies here, there's a lot that people were promised that the big beautiful bill would deliver, but it's actually not going to prohibit welfare for illegal aliens. It does not stop funding sex changes for kids. It does not end registration of suppressors, does not defund Planned Parenthood for 10 years, does not implement the REINS Act, and does not reduce the deficit. And we saw a lot of criticism over the weekend that Chuck Schumer made everyone listen to the entire reading of this bill. But the reality is, even Marjorie Taylor Greene said initially she supported the bill because it's what President Trump wanted, and then later raised concerns about the AI aspect after she realized it was in there and said she's not voting for it because of this. So as much as we think Chuck Schumer, his policies, and probably his intentions may not have been for that express purpose, the point here a lot of people are missing is a valid one. How many people voting on this bill had actually read it in its entirety before that point? Blind support for anything or anyone should not be the way any government is run. If you're representing the people and best interests of the country, you better know what you're voting on, especially if you're going to make appearances on Fox News every day telling Americans why this is so great for them, while in fact, much of it is not. Essentially, the era of propaganda is still very much alive and well, and despite the best efforts to smear Thomas Massie, there is an overwhelming amount of support for representatives who tell people the truth. And many are stating this bill really should be split into several bills, single-issue bills that can be addressed individually, based on their pros and cons. We'll see how this develops and keep you updated. Global chaos is spiking. Wars are erupting like never before. Communication systems are prime targets for EMPs, cyber attacks, or direct strikes. Don't wait. Secure your family's lifeline now with encrypted satellite communication from sat123.com/pulse. Grab the Immersat satellite phone, fully encrypted with 150 monthly minutes for only $85.95 a month, including rollover minutes, damage insurance, and a free Faraday bag. Or get the Bivvy stick for satellite SMS at just $45.99 a month with 150 credits. These are the lowest prices ever. Time's running out. Trusted by militaries, these work worldwide. Go to sat123.com/pulse now and use code PULSE for 10% off site-wide and stay connected no matter what. You can also give them a call on 1941 394 0406 to access heavily discounted open box and refurbished devices for an even more cost-effective purchase. That link again is sat123.com/pulse or call 1941 394 0406 today. This in from the Daily Caller. Canada bends knee again on key tax after Trump pulls plug on trade talks. So this also happened over the last few days. Canada announced Sunday that it is rescinding its digital services tax in an attempt to restart trade negotiations with the US government. Canada's Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne announced in a statement that the tax would be revoked in anticipation of a mutually beneficial comprehensive trade arrangement with the United States. The announcement comes after President Donald Trump announced Friday that he was scrapping trade talks with Canada over the country's decision to impose the digital service tax on US technology companies, which he referred to as a direct and blatant attack on our country in a Truth Social post, adding that the tax was egregious. In our negotiations on a new economic and security relationship between Canada and the United States, Canada's new government will always be guided by the overall contribution of any possible agreement to the best interests of Canadian workers and businesses, Prime Minister of Canada Mark Carney said in a statement. Today's announcement will support a resumption of negotiations toward the July 21st timeline set out at this month's G7 Leaders Summit in Kananaskis. Canada's DST would have made US tech companies face a 3% charge on Canadian revenue, over $20 million, according to BBC. Champagne wrote in a statement that the Canadian government is focused on building the strongest economy in the G7 and standing up for Canadian workers and businesses. Canada's new government is focused on building the strongest economy in the G7 and standing up for Canadian workers and businesses, Champagne said in the statement. Rescinding the digital services tax will allow the negotiations of a new economic and security relationship with the US to make vital progress and reinforce our work to create jobs and build prosperity for all Canadians. When asked for a comment, Department of Finance Canada referred the Daily Caller News Foundation to Champagne's aforementioned statement, as well as his Sunday night X post. President Trump has once again leveraged the power of the American economy, the best and biggest in the world, to deliver a victory for American industries and workers, White House spokesman Kush Desai told the DCNF in a statement. Now, as well as this comes in from Euractiv.com. Trump suggests EU's digital rules are also on the table in trade talks. Donald Trump suggested on Friday that the EU's enforcement of its big tech laws is on the table in ongoing trade talks that could see the EU make concessions in order to avoid certain US tariffs. The US president announced the immediate suspension of the trade talks with Canada. And then, of course, we've seen Canada respond to that. But he also is saying that in enforcing their digital service tax, Canada was obviously copying the European Union, which has done the same thing and is currently under discussion with us. The EU does not tax US tech firms specifically, but Trump has previously criticized the bloc's laws to rein in anti-competitive behavior by those firms and moderate the content they publish. The Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act, respectively. These rules include fines for non-compliance following investigations. Now, Trump's Friday post is a suggestion that EU negotiators may be discussing how those laws are enforced against US firms in their talks on a deal to lower tariffs on European exports across the Atlantic. But the European Commission denied Trump's suggestion, saying, "We've been very clear on the sovereignty of our decision-making process, including our digital laws. They are untouchable," a spokesperson said. "We are fully and deeply, or rather still fully and deeply engaged in negotiations," they added. The Wall Street Journal, citing a leaked draft agreement, reported last week that the EU and US could enter into a formal dialogue on the Digital Markets Act following the trade deal, with US firms exempted from enforcement during those talks. That prompted a strong denial from the Commission's top US trade official, Matthias Jorgensen, who told MEPs this week that putting the EU's regulatory autonomy on the table was not an option for us. Well, at this month's G7 summit in Canada, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Trump agreed to find a solution to the trade spat before 9th of July. Von der Leyen told EU leaders on Thursday that she'd received the latest counter-proposal from the US. Now, while all of this may seem insignificant, the reason it matters is because it clearly shows the leverage that America and President Trump has on other nations when it comes to trade. We saw many statements indicating that cooperation between these nations wouldn't be possible if they didn't adhere to American values. You may recall the Vice President J.D. Vance previously stating in an interview, quote, "It is insane that we would support a military alliance that isn't going to be pro-free speech," end quote. Back then, everyone thought perhaps President Trump would use his leverage to force countries into removing things like hate speech laws and censorship. This was even something that was on the table when negotiating with the UK. The aim was for the UK to repeal their ridiculous hate speech laws. But unfortunately, none of this has materialized. There seems to be an agreement possible where things like a digital service tax are concerned, but not when it comes to free speech. A shame, really, particularly because of J.D. Vance's previous statements on this. The US should be demanding, at bare minimum, free speech principles from the countries it is allied or working in cooperation with. This 4th of July, declare your independence from big tech with Above Phone. Get early access to their Independence Day sale at abovephone.com/pulse. Above Phones offer unmatched privacy, complete control over app permissions, and freedom to download from private app stores compatible with any cell service or Wi-Fi. Choose from affordable entry-level models or the premium Pixel 9 Pro XL. Plus, score deep discounts on privacy-focused laptops with modern hardware and a user-friendly Linux OS. No spying, no tracking. Enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee, a free 45-minute support call, and flexible payment plans. You can choose a payment plan at the checkout and break up your total into 4 interest-free payments or secure financing for anywhere between 3 and 24 months. Payment plans are currently only available in the US. You can select pay with cryptocurrency as well at checkout to complete your order using Bitcoin or Monero. If you've got questions, Above's team is ready and waiting to help. Call 1-888-36-ABOVE Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central, or chat with the team at abovephone.com/pulse by clicking on the Chat With Us button. Declare your independence from big tech today and save big right now at abovephone.com/pulse. So last week we told you that despite all of the hype that World War III is now over, guys, no need to worry, everyone's gone back to bed and it's peacetime. That was definitely not the case, especially indicated by the NATO meeting where all of NATO said it is still their mission for Ukraine to join. Zelensky was, of course, present, even though he's not part of NATO. And despite the fact that this is the red line for Putin, they're still fully committed to this. Apart from this, we've told you about multiple countries talking about reinstituting drafts, the UK saying we've got to be ready for wartime. The temperature has not decreased, just the propaganda in the media has changed. Well, this in from antiwar.com. Russia pounds targets across Ukraine as there's no end in sight to the war. Russia launched a heavy drone and missile attack on targets across Ukraine overnight Saturday into Sunday as the war continues to rage with no end in sight, despite President Trump's earlier push for a ceasefire. The Ukrainian Air Force said that Russia fired 60 missiles and 477 drones and decoy drones designed to overwhelm air defenses. The Air Force said it shot down about 90% of the projectiles launched into Ukraine, but many of the missiles were able to strike targets. A Ukrainian fighter pilot flying a US-made F-16 died in a crash while attempting to intercept Russian missiles and drones. According to the New York Times, it's unclear if any civilians were killed in the Russian barrage, though a woman was reported killed by Russian shelling near the front line in Kherson. Fighting also continued along the front line in eastern Ukraine, where Russian forces are making gains in the Donetsk Oblast. Russia's defense ministry said Russian troops took over a settlement in Donetsk and claimed Ukraine's military suffered more than 1,200 casualties over the past day, but the number isn't verified. In response to the Russian attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for more help from his Western backers. Quote, "This war must be brought to an end. Pressure on the aggressor is needed, and so is protection. Protection from ballistic and other missiles, from drones, and from terror," he wrote on X. Ukraine needs to strengthen its air defense, the thing that best protects lives. These are American systems which we are ready to buy. We count on leadership, political will, and the support of the United States, Europe, and all of our partners, Zelensky added. The attack came just a few days after Zelensky met with President Trump at the NATO summit in The Hague and asked for more Patriot missile defense systems, a request that Trump said he was considering. While he campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine, Trump continues to fuel the conflict by providing military aid and intelligence support, the article says. And in case you missed this, just the other day, Trump said he would absolutely consider bombing Iran again. US President Donald Trump had said that he would absolutely consider bombing Iran again. Responding to a question from the BBC's Namir Iqbal at a White House press briefing, he said he would without question attack the country if intelligence concluded that Iran could enrich uranium to concerning levels. Now, we've all seen the back and forth on social media between President Trump and Iranian leadership, as well as the intelligence leak, which there has been much speculation on. The leak in question is that allegedly the US did little damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. The Trump administration is saying the leak came from Democrats, not sure which ones, and was fake news, and we need to wait for a full assessment before speaking further on the matter. We're not sure how something can be fake news and a leak at the same time, but this really signals that there is more to this story than we're being told. What is interesting is that the Ayatollah has insisted that the US gained no achievements from strikes on its nuclear facilities and that the strikes did not accomplish anything significant. This seems like a really strange thing to admit. If Iran doesn't want war and wants to keep working towards its nuclear capabilities and the US didn't destroy as much as is being claimed, why wouldn't they just pretend these capabilities were completely obliterated so as to avoid any further conflict? Perhaps some feel it is pride, men, world leaders beating their chests. But it does seem that, just like in the US and in Israel and every country, there are those who seek diplomacy and those who want to stoke war. The question remains now, which of these two will have their way and rise to the surface? We certainly hope cooler heads will prevail, but we'll continue to keep you updated on this. Are you protected in a world where threats of EMPs, solar flares, 5G, and all types of EMF are interfering with our very existence? Well, escape the grid with Escape Zone, bringing you the highest quality Faraday technology for ultimate preparedness. Choose when and where your devices are detectable. Faraday bags protect you from EMPs, car theft, card and device skimming, identity theft, tracking, Bluetooth, and GPS. You can choose from premium mobile Faraday bags, crossbody bags, and laptop bags, and even women's handbags, or you can opt for the ultimate protection with a ballistic backpack, combining cutting-edge Faraday technology with a ballistic 3A Kevlar for the ultimate protection and preparedness. Now you can also protect from EMF with their top-notch EMF beanies and blankets, shielding you from some of the most harmful frequencies in our environment. Whatever your needs are, Escape Zone has you covered, and their range is perfect for personal use, family use, or even as a gift for someone that you truly care about. Visit escapezone.com/pulse and protect you and your loved ones today. That's escapezone.com/pulse. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. If you haven't noticed, we're committed to telling you the truth no matter what. You can catch us doing that every single weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's every weekday, Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. You can support us to stay independent by shopping directly with our sponsors who make this show possible. Their links are in the description below. You can also like, share, and give us your thoughts and comments on the broadcast. Make sure to follow Vigilant Fox on X at Vigilant Fox, as well as Substack to stay up to date with the latest breaking news. Follow Zeee Media on Rumble, where we also air this show each weekday and post our other deep dives. Follow at ZEE_media on X, and as always, all of our content is also on zeemedia.com. Join us every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tell everyone about it, and as always, keep your finger on the pulse with the Daily Pulse. Good night.